Emily Carter hadn't planned on being stuck on the side of a rural Montana highway. Her car had started shaking just past Billings, then completely died 20 miles later. She pulled over, turned the key a few times, and then gave up. There was no signal, no gas station in sight. Just open road, wide sky, and the cold creeping in. She was 34, married, and on her way to visit her sister in South Dakota. But truthfully, she was running not just from Oregon, but from a marriage that had gone quiet. Her husband, Mark, was a good man, kind in the way a neighbor might be. But it had been over a year since he looked at her like someone he still loved. She hadn't told him she was leaving, not really. Just packed a bag, said she needed space, and drove away. When the big rig pulled over behind her, she was cautious. She'd always been careful, especially alone. But then the passenger door opened and two men stepped out, one tall and calm, the other smiling like trouble, but in a charming way. "Need a lift?" the taller one asked. "We're headed east. Next town's about 40 miles. Emily hesitated, then nodded. The taller man introduced himself as Dean, mid-40s. Soft-spoken, serious eyes, clean flannel shirt, hands like he'd worked with them his whole life. The other was Josh, a few years younger than her, leather jacket, confident, playful. She climbed into the cab between them, clutching her bag like it was a shield. The truck smelled like coffee, worn leather, and a hint of peppermint. Josh started talking right away, asking where she was headed, why she was alone. She kept her answers short, polite. "Long drive," Dean said. Breaking the silence a few miles later, Emily nodded, watching the landscape blur through the windshield. She had never been in a truck this size before. It felt strange to be riding with strangers, but at the same time, it felt good not to be alone. As the truck rolled down the highway, the weather started to shift. Clouds pulled together like fists in the sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance. "You might have timed this ride just right," Josh joked. "Storm's coming." Dean reached behind the seat, handed Emily a metal thermos. "Coffee." She took it, fingers brushing his for just a second. It was warm. Comforting. They drove for an hour without stopping. Emily started to relax a little. Josh kept the conversation light. Stories from the road, weird people at truck stops, jokes about gas station food. Emily laughed, genuinely. She realized how long it had been since she'd laughed with someone. She glanced at Dean occasionally. He wasn't chatty like Josh, but when he did speak, it mattered. He looked at her like he noticed things others didn't. Not in a flirtatious way, just ... aware. When the rain started, it came fast. Thick drops smacking the windshield. Wipers working hard to keep up. Visibility dropped and the truck slowed. The sound of the rain filled the cab, steady and loud. "I always love driving in rain," Emily said quietly. "Feels like the world is pressing pause." Dean glanced at her. "Yeah, like it gives you time to think." They drove through it. The world outside turned gray, wet, and blurred. Inside the cab, something shifted. The three of them weren't strangers anymore. There was something unspoken starting to form a thread of connection none of them expected. Emily looked down at her hands. She hadn't worn her wedding ring. She'd taken it off weeks ago, left it on the bathroom counter back home. She wasn't sure why. Maybe she'd known all along that she wasn't coming back. She caught Josh looking at her, his smile softer now. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said, but it wasn't convincing. Josh didn't push. Sometimes the road's the only place that makes sense. The cab went quiet again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. They stopped at a small gas station on the edge of a town too small to have a name anyone remembered. Emily stretched her legs, rain still drizzling. She pulled her jacket tighter, walked a few steps away from the truck. Letting the cold air clear her head, Dean joined her, leaned against the side of the truck, arms crossed. "You don't have to tell us what you're running from," he said, "but I can see it in your eyes." She looked at him. He wasn't trying to get anything from her, just ... "Being honest, I'm not even sure anymore," she whispered. "I think I just stopped feeling like myself." Dean nodded like he understood. Sometimes we all need to get lost for a while. They didn't say much after that, but something passed between them, quiet understanding. Back in the truck, Josh had found a new playlist, soft indie songs that felt like rainy days. Emily sat back in her seat, watched the road ahead, and for the first time in months, she felt present, not stuck in the past. Not scared of the future, just ... here. They hit the road again, rain still tapping the windows. The sky had darkened late afternoon, turning to early evening. Lights from passing trucks flickered through the cab. Dean drove, eyes steady. Josh had dozed off against the passenger door. Emily found herself staring out the window, lost in thoughts. But she wasn't sad. She was thinking about choices, about people, about how sometimes the most unexpected detour can change the entire direction of your life. She wasn't in love with either of these men. Not yet, maybe not ever. But they had offered her something rare: kindness, attention, space to breathe. And in this small moving world of steel and rain, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: alive. The truck kept moving through the night, and Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm of the road carry her forward, unsure where she was going, but no longer afraid to find out. The rain didn't stop. It softened, then came back stronger. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, slick and dark, broken only by the steady hum of the truck's engine and the quiet sound of music playing from Josh's phone. The road had emptied. It felt like the three of them were the only people left in the world. Emily sat between the two men, wrapped in Dean's spare blanket, the smell of old cologne and leather, faint but comforting. Her fingers were warm around a fresh cup of gas station coffee. She hadn't spoken much since they got back on the road. And neither had Dean. Josh had been unusually quiet, too. She looked at the clock on the dashboard. Just past midnight. Dean kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Josh leaned his head back against the window, looking out at the rain. Emily glanced at both of them, feeling something between them shift. Not in a dangerous way, but in a deep, personal way. Something unspoken had started to fill the space between them. "You never said what you're leaving behind." Josh finally said, not looking at her. Emily hesitated. "Then, a husband. A house. A life that didn't feel like mine anymore." Dean said nothing, but she could feel his attention shift. "I thought marriage was supposed to be this ... thing," she continued, voice soft. "A place you could settle. A place to be safe. But over time, it just ... stopped feeling like home. I don't even remember the last time we talked. Really talked?" Josh nodded. "Happens more often than people admit." The words hung there, heavy but honest. They stopped again just before 1 a.m., pulling into a 24-hour truck stop. It was quiet, lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. Inside, Emily used the restroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes looked tired, not just from the drive, but from years of pretending things were okay. When she came back outside, Dean was fueling the truck. Josh leaned against the side, arms crossed, sipping a soda. "You good?" he asked. She nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You don't talk like someone who's just passing time." Josh said after a moment, "You talk like someone who's been stuck for too long." Emily met his gaze. "Maybe I have." Dean joined them again, wiping his hands with a rag. "We can make it to the next state line by morning if you're still up for riding with us." "I am," Emily said without thinking. Then more gently, "If that's okay." Dean gave a slight nod. "It's okay." Back in the cab, the dynamic shifted again. Emily now leaned slightly toward Dean, as if something about his quiet strength gave her balance. Josh noticed but didn't say anything. Instead, he leaned toward the window, headphones in, pretending to rest, though he wasn't sleeping. Dean drove in silence. Occasionally, he'd glance at Emily, but he didn't stare. His presence felt like still water, calm, deep, steady. Emily watched his hands on the wheel, the way he checked the mirrors, the way he gently guided the truck down hills and around curves. There was something grounding about him. He didn't talk much, but his silence made her feel safer than words ever had. She found herself talking again, this time without being asked. She told Dean about how she and her husband had grown apart, how silence had become more common than conversation, how she didn't feel seen anymore. "I think we both stopped trying," she admitted. "We just became two people living in the same house." Dean didn't judge. He just listened, occasionally nodding, keeping his eyes on the road. That kind of attention, quiet, respectful, felt like a gift. "You ever been married?" Emily asked. Dean hesitated. "Once, a long time ago." "What happened?" "She needed something I couldn't give," he said simply. "I didn't realize it until it was too late." Emily looked at him, then turned her eyes back to the window. The rain had slowed. The world outside was dark and still. Her heart felt heavy but open, like something had broken, but in a way that let the light in. Later, when they stopped again for gas and snacks, Josh walked with her into the small convenience store. They picked up a few items: granola bars, water, mints. On the way back, Josh spoke. "You and Dean," he said casually. "You two seem like you've known each other longer than a few hours." Emily smiled softly. "I don't know what that is. He's just easy to be around." Josh looked at her for a long second. "Yeah, I get it." Back in the truck, Josh took the driver's seat for the next stretch. Dean moved to the passenger side and Emily sat in the middle again. This time, Dean's arm lightly touched hers. Neither moved away. The truck rolled through the early hours of the morning. The rain had stopped and fog had started to settle low along the ground. The road was quiet, the radio playing soft acoustic music in the background. "I used to dream about leaving," Emily said suddenly. "Just driving away. I never thought I actually would." Dean looked at her. "What stopped you?" "I didn't want to hurt him. I thought staying was kinder." Josh kept his eyes on the road. "Sometimes leaving is the kinder thing." The cab went quiet again. Emily leaned her head back and closed her eyes, but she didn't sleep. She listened to the engine, the wind, the breath of the two men beside her. She felt like she was in between two lives, the one she had left behind, and the one waiting for her ahead, somewhere before sunrise. They pulled off at a viewpoint overlooking a stretch of dark forest. Josh killed the engine. "Let's take a break," he said. They stepped out. The sky was starting to lighten just slightly. Not morning yet, but close. Emily stood near the edge, the cold air waking her up, cutting through the fog of her thoughts. Josh walked up beside her. "Do you know where you're going next?" Emily shrugged. "Not really. I was supposed to go to my sister's, but now I don't know. Everything feels different." Josh looked at her, voice softer now. "It is different." She turned to him. "What do you mean?" "You're not the same person who got into this truck. I think you know that." Emily didn't answer. Instead, she looked out at the horizon. Dean stayed back, leaning against the truck, watching quietly. His silence wasn't distance. It was space, a kind of quiet support that didn't ask anything from her. When they got back inside the truck, the mood had shifted again. Emily felt torn not between the two men, but between two versions of herself. One still clinging to the past, the other starting to believe in something new. Josh drove them to a small motel just past the South Dakota border. The sun had finally started to rise. A soft golden light spread across the parking lot. "This is where we leave you," Josh said, helping her with her bag. Dean stayed in the truck watching. Emily walked over to his side. He rolled down the window. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dean nodded. "Take care of yourself." Josh handed her a piece of paper with a phone number on it. "If you ever want to keep going, call." Emily looked at both of them, two strangers who had become something more. She didn't know what the next day would bring. But for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to find out. As the truck pulled away and disappeared down the road, Emily stood alone in the parking lot, heart full of something new. It wasn't love. Not yet, but it was hope. The motel was quiet. The kind of place travelers stayed for one night, then moved on. Emily checked into a room with peeling wallpaper and a heater that made strange noises, but she didn't care. She stood by the window for a long time after Dean and Josh drove away, watching the road disappear into the early morning light. The silence in the room was thick. She set her bag down slowly, unsure of what to do next. The night in the truck still echoed in her mind. The conversations, the glances, the way she felt something shift deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility? She didn't sleep much. When she closed her eyes, she saw Dean's steady gaze, the way he listened without needing to fix anything. She heard Josh's voice, bold and sincere, challenging her to stop hiding from herself by mid-morning. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the piece of paper Josh had given her. Just a number. No name. But it carried weight. An invitation. Not just a call, but to choose. Emily thought about her husband, Mark. She hadn't spoken to him in days. He'd probably noticed she was gone by now. Or maybe he hadn't. Their life had become quiet in the most painful way. Not angry, not chaotic. Just ... disconnected. She thought of all the mornings like this she had spent alone in their house, eating breakfast next to someone who didn't look up anymore. She thought of all the nights they had turned their backs in bed, each waiting for the other to speak first. And then she thought about that truck cab, the unexpected warmth, the honesty, the way both Dean and Josh had seen her at around noon. Emily walked down the road to a diner she'd seen from the motel window. It was old, the kind with red booths and a bell over the door. She ordered coffee and toast, sitting alone by the window. The waitress smiled at her like she'd seen women like her before. Women in the middle of something. Women standing at the edge of change. Emily stirred her coffee slowly. The rain had stopped. The sky was clearing. She pulled the ring from her coat pocket, her wedding ring, and held it in her hand. She stared at it for a long time. It wasn't anger she felt. It wasn't regret. It was something quieter. The realization that love, when left alone too long, can fade without meaning to. She wasn't running from love. She was running from a life where love no longer showed up. Just then, the doorbell rang. A trucker stepped in, younger than Dean, with grease on his hands and headphones around his neck. He nodded at her. She smiled faintly, realizing how different things felt now, how much one ride had changed her. She didn't call Josh that day. Instead, she took a notebook from her bag and began to write. Not a letter. Not a list. Just words, whatever came out. Things like, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I can't go back. I want to feel seen, even in silence. I'm tired of waiting for life to happen to me. By late afternoon, she checked out of the motel. She walked 2 miles to the edge of town and bought a bus ticket heading east. Not toward her sisters, somewhere new. She didn't need to know the final stop. She just needed to keep moving forward. On the bus. She looked out the window, watching flat land roll past. She thought of Dean, how calm he was, how solid. He didn't need to fill the silence. He'd just let her be. And Josh the opposite in every way. Loud and restless, but with a heart that cared deeply. 2 men, 1 night, and a moment in time that had cracked her world open. She didn't want to choose between them. That wasn't what this was about. It was about choosing herself. Still, a part of her wondered, what if one of them had stayed? She reached into her jacket, pulled out the slip of paper again. She stared at the number, then folded it carefully and put it in her wallet. 2 days passed. She stayed in a small town in Minnesota, working from her laptop in coffee shops, taking walks by the river. She hadn't spoken to Mark. She didn't plan to, not yet. She needed to know who she was without him. On the 3rd morning, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey, just checking. You good? Josh? She stared at the screen, her heart thumping. I'm okay. On the road, thinking a lot. A minute later, you thinking about coming back this way? She smiled. There it was again, not pressure, not control. Just possibility. She didn't answer right away. She needed time. That night she sat outside her motel room under the stars, wrapped in a blanket, thinking about her future. She didn't want to be rescued. She didn't want a new version of the same old story. She wanted truth. Something real. She picked up her phone and texted back. Not yet, but thank you. That night, it changed me. Josh replied, same here. No pressure. Just stay true to you. She never heard from Dean, but she didn't expect to. He didn't strike her as the kind of man who chased things. He let the road bring people in and out of his life. She respected that. Still, a small part of her hoped they'd meet again one day. Somewhere along another stretch of road, weeks passed. Emily found a small apartment in a town she'd never been to before. She got a part-time job at a bookstore, started journaling every day, and joined a local walking group. Her life was quiet, but it was hers. She kept the ring. She didn't wear it, but she didn't throw it away either. Some chapters didn't end with fire. Some just faded. And that was okay. One evening, she walked past a gas station just off the main highway. A truck was parked outside. Not Dean's, not Josh's, but it made her pause. She thought about all the women who stayed, hoping things would change. And all the women who left, not knowing what would come next. She whispered, thank you, under her breath. To the road, to the truck, to the two men who reminded her what it felt like to be seen. Then she kept walking. She didn't need a love story to feel whole, but she'd had one, a brief one. Unexpected and intense, not meant to last, but meant to awaken her. And that, in the end, was enough. Ethan didn't know how to describe the feeling that followed them home after that strange weekend. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't forgiveness either. It was something in between, a quiet heaviness that filled the air around them, like fog that refused to lift. The drive back to Seattle was almost silent. Lily stared out the window most of the way, lost in her thoughts, while Ethan kept his eyes on the road, his mind replaying everything that had happened. When they pulled into their driveway, it was just after sunset. Their house looked exactly the same, the porch light glowing, the roses Lily had planted last spring still blooming, yet it felt different. The warmth that once lived inside those walls seemed distant now. Ethan carried their bags inside and placed them by the door. Lily followed slowly, pausing at the entrance like she wasn't sure she wanted to step in. I'll make some tea, Steve said softly, her voice small and careful. Ethan nodded. Sure. While she moved quietly in the kitchen, Ethan sat on the couch and let the silence sink in. He looked at the photos on the wall, their wedding day, their first trip to California, the goofy selfies they'd taken in their backyard, all moments frozen in time, untouched by the kind of pain that now filled the room. When Lily brought him a cup of tea, Sue sat across from him, not beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Then she said, I know you don't trust me right now. Ethan looked up, his eyes tired. It's not about trust, he said slowly. It's about understanding why. Lily stared into her cup. Because somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be alive. I thought that weekend would wake something up in me, remind me that I still had passion, that I still mattered. Her voice cracked a little, but instead it made me realize how much I'd been drifting away from you. Her honesty hit him hard. He'd been angry, yes, but deep down he knew she wasn't chasing another man. She was chasing a feeling, a version of herself that had disappeared beneath years of work, routine, and quiet exhaustion. Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You could have told me, Lily. You didn't need to go that far to find what was missing. I didn't plan it, she said quickly. When Jenna invited us, I thought it was just a normal gathering. But when I saw what it really was, part of me wanted to run, and part of me wanted to see how far I could go before I realized what I truly wanted. She paused, tears forming in her eyes. And it wasn't anyone else. It was you. It's always been you. Ethan didn't speak for a long time. He just watched her cry quietly, her shoulders trembling. He wanted to reach for her, to comfort her, but something inside him still hesitated. Love was there, yes, but it was tangled with hurt. Finally, he said softly, Do you still love me, Lily? She looked up immediately. With everything I have. He nodded slowly. Then we'll figure it out. But I need time. She nodded too, wiping her face. Take all the time you need. The next few weeks were quiet. They didn't talk about the gathering again, but it lingered between them like a shadow. Ethan buried himself in work, staying late at the office while Lily started going for long walks in the evenings. They shared polite conversations, dinner plans, bills, grocery lists, but the warmth hadn't returned yet. One Saturday morning, Lily left a note on the table, went to the lake. Need some time to think. Ethan stared at it for a while, unsure what to feel. A part of him wanted to follow her. Another part thought maybe she needed to be alone. By noon, he couldn't sit still anymore. He got in the car and drove to the same lake house area where the weekend had taken place. It was quiet now, no music, no laughter, just the sound of the wind in the trees. He spotted Lily sitting on the dock, her feet dangling above the water. She looked peaceful, almost fragile. When she saw him, she smiled faintly. I knew you'd come. Ethan sat beside her. You left without saying anything. I didn't know what to say, she admitted. I just needed to be somewhere that forced me to face everything. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water move gently under the afternoon sun. Then Lily said, Do you remember our first anniversary? You took me here. We spent the night talking about everything we wanted to do together. Ethan smiled a little. Yeah, you said you wanted to start your own design studio one day? She nodded. I still do. But somewhere between chasing deadlines and paying bills, I forgot why I wanted it. That's what I meant that night. Ethan, it wasn't about wanting someone else. It was about wanting me back. He turned to her, and for the first time in weeks, he saw the woman he fell in love with. Not broken, not confused, just human. Then maybe we both forgot, he said. I've been so focused on keeping things together that I stopped paying attention to what makes us feel alive. Lily looked at him, eyes glistening. So what do we do now? Ethan took a deep breath. We start over. But this time, we don't try to go back. We build something new. She smiled, though tears rolled down her cheeks. Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you still see me the same way? He hesitated, searching for the right words. No, he said honestly. But that's not a bad thing. I see you as someone who's real. Someone who's hurt, who's made mistakes, who's still worth fighting for. Lily exhaled shakily, her voice trembling. I don't deserve you. Ethan shook his head. No, Lily, we don't deserve what we went through. But maybe we needed it to remember what's at stake. They sat there until the sun began to set, the light turning golden across the water. It felt like a quiet promise, a moment where words didn't matter anymore. Back home, things didn't magically fix overnight. They still had awkward silences, they still tiptoed around certain topics. But slowly, small changes began to appear. Ethan started leaving little notes for her again. Simple things like, dinner's in the oven, or you looked beautiful today. Lily began painting again, filling their home with colors instead of silence. One night, a few weeks later, they were sitting on the porch when Lily said softly, I told Jenna we wouldn't be joining any of her gatherings again. Ethan chuckled lightly. Good choice. I think she meant well, Lily said. But what we needed wasn't adventure. It was honesty. He nodded. And patience. For the first time in a long time, their hands found each other naturally. No hesitation, no effort. Just connection. Months passed. The memory of that weekend faded, but the lesson remained. They began therapy together, not because they were falling apart, but because they wanted to rebuild stronger. Ethan learned how to listen without trying to fix everything. Lily learned how to speak without fear of being misunderstood. It wasn't easy, but it was real. One evening as they sat by the fireplace, Lily said quietly, You know what broke me that night? It wasn't what I almost did. It was realizing how close I came to losing you. Ethan looked at her for a long time before replying. You didn't lose me, Lily. You scared me. Yes, but I'm still here. She smiled softly. And I'm still here too. That night, Ethan realized something he hadn't before. Sometimes the hardest part of love isn't forgiving your partner. It's forgiving the version of them that hurt you and learning to love the person they're becoming. Over time, the cracks between them became lines that held them together instead of pulling them apart. They still had moments of doubt, but those moments were now followed by conversation, not silence. On their 8th anniversary, Ethan surprised Lily by taking her back to the same lake. The same dock where everything had nearly fallen apart and where they had decided to begin again. As they sat watching the sunset, Ethan said quietly, "This place used to remind me of pain, but now it reminds me of strength." Lily smiled. "It reminds me of love, not the perfect kind, but the real one." He reached for her hand, and she held it tightly. The water shimmered beneath them, calm and endless. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt peace, not because everything was fixed, but because they were both still trying. And as the evening light faded, he thought about how close they had come to losing everything, and how that very moment had taught them what love truly meant. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never breaking. It was about choosing every single day to rebuild. Even after the cracks appeared, final line. Some hearts break quietly, not from betrayal, but from the moment you realize love must be fought for, even after it's been wounded. Ethan Miller thought he knew what love was. For 7 years, he and his wife Lily had built what looked like a perfect marriage. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Seattle, had stable jobs, and often spent weekends cooking together or hiking nearby trails. To everyone else, they were the couple who had it all. But inside their home, silence had started to replace laughter. Their conversations were shorter, their kisses more routine. And their once electric connection had dimmed into something that felt safe but distant. It wasn't that they stopped loving each other. It was that life had become predictable. Ethan worked long hours as an engineer. Lily, a graphic designer, spent most of her days alone, filling the quiet with podcasts and sketches. They still went on date nights, still said, "I love you." But those words had started to sound like reminders rather than feelings. Then came an unexpected text. It was from Jenna, one of Lily's old college friends. She and her husband, Mark, were hosting a couples-only weekend at their lake house. The message promised good food, laughter, and a night to explore deeper emotional connections. It sounded innocent enough, though the phrasing made Ethan frown. When he asked Lily about it, she shrugged lightly and said, "Jenna always plans unusual gatherings." "It might be fun," Ethan agreed, even though something about it didn't sit right. Maybe he hoped a weekend away would bring them closer. Maybe he wanted to believe this was just another get-together. So that Friday, he packed his bag, put on his best smile, and drove with Lily to Lake Sammamish, where the event was being held. The lake house was stunning, large glass windows overlooking still blue water, string lights glowing across the patio, soft music playing from hidden speakers. Several couples were already there, laughing, drinking wine, and chatting like old friends. Everything looked normal, yet beneath the surface, there was an energy Ethan couldn't quite define, an unspoken tension in the air. Mark greeted them warmly, handing Ethan a drink while Jenna hugged Lily tightly. "I'm so glad you came," Jenna said. "Tonight's about trust, freedom, and rediscovering connection." Ethan smiled politely, though the word freedom echoed strangely in his mind. Dinner was served outside under the lights. The food was fancy, the conversation lively. People talked about love, relationships, and how marriage could become too safe. A woman across the table joked that long-term couples sometimes needed to reignite the flame by trying new experiences. Everyone laughed, including Lily. Ethan forced a chuckle, but his stomach tightened. As the night went on, the tone of the gathering shifted. The laughter softened and the talk grew more personal. Someone mentioned partner trust exercises, and before Ethan could ask what that meant, Jenna stood up to explain. She said the evening was about emotional openness, that sometimes couples learn more about their bond by stepping outside their comfort zones. "There's no pressure," she said gently. "But if anyone's curious, we'll be exploring partner swapping later tonight. Not about crossing boundaries, about understanding connection, attraction, and communication." The air went still. Ethan felt his heart drop. He looked around expecting others to laugh it off, but no one did. Instead, there were quiet nods, exchanged glances, curious smiles. And then he looked at Lily. She wasn't laughing. She was thinking. Their eyes met. And Ethan saw something flicker in her gaze. Not desire, but curiosity, maybe confusion. She reached for his hand under the table, her fingers trembling slightly. "Ethan," she whispered, "maybe this is about trust. Maybe it's not what it sounds like." He stared at her, searching for the woman he knew, the one who once told him she couldn't even imagine loving anyone else. "You're not serious, right?" he said quietly. Lily didn't answer right away. "I just think maybe we've been stuck. Maybe seeing things from a different perspective could help." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He wasn't angry, just lost. Since when did his wife need something different to feel close to him? Jenna's voice interrupted his thoughts. "There's no obligation. You can observe, talk, or step away. The whole point is communication." Ethan nodded stiffly, pretending to be calm. Lily gave him a reassuring look, but he could see uncertainty in her eyes, too. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She just seemed lost. Maybe she didn't even understand what she was asking for. The couples began breaking into small groups. For what? Jenna called connection sessions. Some people went upstairs, others stayed near the fire pit. Ethan and Lily sat alone for a few minutes. He could hear soft laughter, faint music, and the sound of water lapping against the shore. Everything felt unreal. "Lily," he said finally, "we don't need this. We just need to talk to remember who we are." She sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I know. But maybe that's the problem. We keep talking, but nothing changes. I just thought maybe this could remind us what it feels like to be wanted again." Her honesty broke something in him. He realized she wasn't chasing excitement. She was chasing a feeling she'd lost somewhere along the way, the feeling of being seen before he could respond. Mark walked over with a glass of wine and asked if they wanted to join the next round. "It's all about trust and boundaries," he said casually. "You can just watch if you want." Lily looked at Ethan. Her eyes said, "Please, just trust me." Reluctantly, he agreed. Maybe if he didn't, it would only make her feel more distant. So they followed the group upstairs to a softly lit room where music played and people spoke in low tones. Ethan stayed by the door, uncomfortable but trying not to show it. Couples sat in small circles, sharing stories about love, attraction, and what drew them to their partners. Some held hands with different people while talking, calling it an exercise in openness. Lily was quiet at first, watching. Then Ryan, a confident, charming man in his late 30s, joined their circle. He smiled at Lily and asked, "What's one thing you miss from the early days of your relationship?" She smiled shyly. "The excitement," she admitted. "Back then, every look felt like electricity." Ryan nodded. "That's the hardest part to keep alive. It's not about changing partners, it's about remembering how to feel alive again." Ethan listened, trying to understand, but jealousy twisted inside him. He could see the warmth in Lily's expression as she spoke, the way her voice softened, the way she leaned forward slightly. It wasn't flirtation, but it was closeness. And that closeness didn't belong to anyone else but him. He didn't interrupt. He just watched quietly until the session ended. When they returned downstairs, Lily seemed quiet, thoughtful, maybe even guilty. She poured herself some water, then sat beside him. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "I don't know," Ethan said honestly. "I just didn't expect." This Lily looked down. "Neither did I." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind outside. Around them, the laughter resumed, but it sounded distant. Finally, Lily whispered, "Maybe this wasn't a good idea." Ethan turned to her. "No, maybe it was a reminder of what?" She asked softly. "That we don't need to look anywhere else to fix what's broken," he said. "We just need to stop pretending it's not." She didn't respond, but her eyes filled with tears. The night had begun with laughter and curiosity, but now it felt heavy with realization, When they finally left the gathering and drove back to their cabin, neither spoke. The silence wasn't cold. It was full of everything they couldn't yet say. Ethan knew something had changed between them that night, though he didn't know if it was the beginning of repair or the start of an ending. As they parked by the lake, Lily whispered, "I'm sorry if I made you feel like you weren't enough." Ethan turned to her. "It's not about being enough, Lily. It's about being us again." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Then maybe we start there." Ethan looked out at the reflection of the moon on the water, wondering how something so beautiful could feel so fragile. And though nothing irreversible had happened that night, something inside him cracked, not from betrayal, but from the fear that love, no matter how deep, can still lose its way. As they walked back into the cabin, Ethan knew one thing for sure: their marriage would never be quite the same again. The morning after the gathering, Ethan woke before sunrise. He lay beside Lily, staring at the ceiling of the small lake cabin they had rented for the weekend. She was asleep, her hair scattered across the pillow, her hand resting on his arm like nothing had changed. But everything had. The night before had left an invisible wall between them, and though she hadn't crossed any line, the fact that she even considered it had shaken him deeply. He got up quietly, stepped outside, and stood by the lake. The air was cool, the water still, reflecting the first colors of dawn. Ethan replayed every moment in his head. Lily's laughter with that man, Ryan, her curious glances, her hesitation, the silence afterward. None of it made sense. They hadn't fought, they hadn't drifted apart dramatically, yet somehow they were no longer on the same side. When Lily woke, she found him sitting outside, lost in thought. "You didn't sleep?" she asked softly. Ethan shook his head. "Not really." She joined him, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "I didn't mean to hurt you last night," she said quietly. "I just wanted to feel something again." "For us." He looked at her, tired but calm. "And did you?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands. "I don't know. I just realized how far we've drifted. It scared me." Her honesty cut through his anger. He couldn't hate her for feeling lost. He'd felt it too. But watching her almost step into something that could have destroyed their marriage had changed the way he looked at her. He loved her, but there was a bruise forming where trust used to live. Later that afternoon, Mark and Jenna invited everyone to return for another gathering. Ethan wanted to decline, but Lily insisted it might help clear the air. "It'll just be dinner and conversation," she said. "No exercises, no weird activities." He agreed, partly because he didn't want to seem controlling, and partly because he wanted to see where her mind truly was. That evening, they drove back to the lake house. The mood was different this time, quieter, less playful. The couples who had been there the night before smiled knowingly at one another, as if sharing a secret. Ryan was there too, sitting by the fire talking to Jenna. He looked up and nodded politely when Ethan and Lily walked in. Ethan gave a small nod back, but avoided eye contact. Dinner began normally. People talked about work, travel, life. It felt more like a calm after a storm. But underneath the small talk, Ethan sensed unspoken tension. Everyone there seemed to be pretending that the night before hadn't happened. Halfway through dinner, Jenna suggested a reflection round. Each couple would share one thing they learned about themselves or their partner during the previous night's event. Ethan's stomach tightened. He didn't want to be part of it, but he couldn't walk out either. One couple talked about trust, another about rekindled affection. Then it was Lily's turn. She took a breath, her voice low but steady. "Last night made me realize that sometimes we look for excitement outside when it's really missing inside. I don't want to chase new experiences. I want to rediscover what I already have." Her words caught Ethan off guard. He felt something stir in his chest, a quiet relief. She wasn't defending what happened. She was acknowledging it for what it was, a mistake in search of meaning. The group applauded softly. Ryan smiled at her, and Ethan didn't like the way it felt. Not because Lily was flirting, but because Ryan seemed to understand her too, easily, like he saw through the cracks in their marriage. After dinner, people drifted toward the patio. The sky was painted in orange and pink, the lake shimmering under the sunset. Ethan stood near the railing, sipping his drink, when Ryan approached him. "Hey," Ryan said, his tone casual. "You've got a good woman. She really cares about you." Ethan studied his face, trying to read his intent. "I know that," he said. Ryan nodded, smiling faintly. "Don't let one rough patch make you forget who she is. Most people wouldn't even admit they felt distant." "She's trying." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't trust Ryan's smooth tone, but his words weren't wrong. Lily was trying in her own confused way. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Ryan sitting too close to her the night before, listening like he understood her better than Ethan did. When Ryan walked away, Lily joined Ethan at the railing. "He said something kind to me earlier," she said softly. "He told me that real love isn't about perfection, it's about patience." Ethan forced a smile. "Sounds like he reads a lot of self-help books." Lily laughed lightly. It was a small moment, but it broke the tension. For the first time that weekend, Ethan saw the woman he fell in love with. Warm, curious, full of quiet humor. He realized he didn't just want to fix things. He wanted her back. But just as he was beginning to breathe again, something happened that reopened the wound. Jenna announced a trust exercise, a simple one. She said, couples would write one honest truth about their relationship on a card, anonymously, and put it in a box. The cards would then be read aloud without names. Ethan didn't like the idea, but Lily encouraged him. "It's just words," she said. "It might help." When the cards were read later, most were harmless things like, "We need more time together," or "I miss how we used to laugh." But one card made Ethan's chest tighten. It said, "I met someone last night who made me remember how it felt to be alive." The room went silent. People looked around, curious but pretending not to care. Ethan tried not to react, but his mind raced. Was it Lily's? It sounded like something she might write, not because she meant it, but because she felt something stir inside her for the first time in a long time. Lily's face was unreadable. She stared at the fire, her hands clasped in her lap. Ethan couldn't tell if she was guilty, scared, or just sad. After the activity ended, Ethan excused himself and walked down to the dock alone. The night was cool, and the reflection of the moon rippled on the dark water. He felt torn between anger and heartbreak, love and disappointment. He wanted to believe Lily wouldn't do anything to betray him. But the uncertainty was eating him alive. A few minutes later, Lily appeared behind him. "You think it was me, don't you?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. "I didn't write that," she said. "But I understand why you'd think I did. Because part of me did feel something, not for anyone else, but for what I lost in myself." Ethan turned to her. "Then tell me what you need, Lily, because I can't keep guessing." She took a step closer, tears in her eyes. "I need to feel like we're still a team. Lately, it's like we live together but don't see each other. I didn't come here to replace you, Ethan. I came here to find us again." He wanted to believe her, and deep down, he did. He reached for her hand and squeezed it. "Then let's go home," he said softly. "Let's leave all of this behind." She nodded. "Okay?" They walked back toward the cabin together, silent but side by side. The others were still talking, laughing, pretending the night hadn't turned heavy. As they passed Ryan, he gave Lily a small knowing nod. She didn't return it. Instead, she tightened her grip on Ethan's hand. That simple gesture told him everything he needed to know. She was still his, but she was scared of losing herself. And he was scared of losing them. When they got back to their room, they didn't speak for a long time. The silence wasn't angry anymore. It was tired, full of unsaid things. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the floor. "You know," he said quietly, "last night, when I saw you talking to him, it felt like I was watching you drift away." Lily walked over and sat beside him. "And I realized that's exactly what I've been doing, slowly, without meaning to." They looked at each other for a long time, to people trying to find their way back from the edge of something they never saw coming. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the silence between them began to soften. For the first time in months, they didn't feel like strangers. But even as Ethan held her hand that night, quiet aches stayed in his chest. He knew love could survive mistakes, but he also knew trust, once shaken, never returned quite the same. And somewhere deep down, he wondered if what broke between them that weekend could ever truly be mended.